Great.
You have a couple minutes for us to pick a title and do a
Sure.
30-second spot?
Absolutely.
Right. So I wrote down some things you said that would make a good title. I'm just going to read them back to you, and you let me know your favorite. Quite driven to write. I would do all the things. I started typing a thing. Write some sentences. Innovating again, damn it. If you read this, your head will explode. A whole army of quantum choices, or if it's of surpassing excellence.
Oh, okay. Well, I like the head exploding one.
That one was fun.
And I like the ones about things. Well, I like innovating again, damn it. I like the one about if you read this, your head will explode. That's
I like that one too.
Yeah, I kind of like that one. Yeah.
Welcome to season 7, episode 13. If you read this, your head will explode. This is Written on the Edge. I'm Ben Sebastian here with my co-host, S.A. Baz Collins.
Hello.
And we're really glad you're here with us. Our guest today has won so many prestigious awards for her writing and advocacy that I'm humbled. She writes in multiple genres, including both the mystery and YA we're going to discuss today. She's a community activist, advocate, and leader who's won 2 Human Rights Awards. She also makes time to be a visual artist. Fans of friends, allow me to introduce Candas Jane Dorsey. Candas, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
It's our pleasure. So you have a huge list of accomplishments. Where did the fire start to become a writer, artist?
Well, I was a baby writer when I was in, I guess, elementary school.
She came out with a pen.
That's right, pretty much. Well, my friends and family who knew me then said I was always quite driven to write. I didn't think of it that way at first. But I had an older brother and older sister who were both really talented. And in my brother's case, a little bit jealous too. So they did certain things. They did visual arts, they did music. My brother's a professional musician and brilliant. And so I was the third, and I kind of had to pick a lane. And so in my perception, I kind of picked writing to double down on when I was in maybe junior high school. But always had a side interest in all the other things. I mean, if I had enough lifetimes to live, I would do all the things, right? So, because the world is a fascinating place. So that's what I did. And I had some encouragement along the way from, these days I would have a name for myself and know that I was a nerd. But I was a total, I watched Star Trek, the original series, when it came on the air, and my father read science fiction and I read it too. And it was just, I love to know things, and that set me, and also I was sick a certain amount. So I was away from school a certain amount. And because I asked lots of questions, I was a teacher's pet, and, there was just all the things tended to kind of put me in my little isolation bubble with respect to my peers. But I love books, and I loved reading them, and read at a high level at a very early age, which sort of amazed everyone but me. I mean, reading, you could just read, and then you could read some more, and that was so cool.
Right.
And so it was kind of logical, I think, because I was writing well at school, I kind of got praised for that. And so it was like, okay, that one gives me actual positive feedback. So let's do that one. And I was also, just deeply interested in what I read and in story, and it all just, it was actually many, many years later that I thought about why I even wrote, because I just did. Did. And it was what it was. And so, that was the thing I did. I thought I had to make my living in other ways. And I actually spent some time in theater when I was a kid, and then I thought, oh no, I should save the world instead. So I went into social work and some, minor person by person world saving. And then I realized that was, well, long story. The place that I worked kind of fell apart, and everyone was very disillusioned, and I was offered some writing work, and so I started freelance writing and realized that I could actually get paid for a grammatical English sentence. That was very exciting. So then I kind of was able to run this parallel stream of freelance writer, teaching writing, eventually teaching at universities as a sessional or a continuing ed instructor first, and then a sessional in communications and writing. So that was over on one side, and on the other side was all the writing, which I was always doing, and spending more and more time at it. Eventually, I was with a group who started an arts newspaper, and then and that ran for about 10 years, and then was bought by another arts newspaper. So I was with another group. We started a publishing company called Books Collective, because it was a collective, and had several imprints. And then I bought the imprint that had published my first book and brought it into the Books Collective, Tesseract Books, which was science fiction publishing. Nice. And so I was still doing all of the things I was still doing the writing on the side. So I was earning my living now, and then I was doing all this industry stuff, and then I was also writing. So part of the reason I don't have lots and lots and lots of books is that I did all the other things as well. And in later years also kind of had aging parents who demanded some of my time, and I shouldn't say demanded, although that was true, but I made that choice to be there for them. And so it's really part of the reason why there's a big explosion of books recently is I had a backlog of work that I'd written after my last publication in 2001, 2002, which was one of my books with Tor, Paradigm of Earth, the science fiction and fantasy books that I wrote. And then I had been writing away, but I'd also been doing some stuff with my folks, and I had some health issues of my own, and just trying to keep body and soul together. And so this stuff was piling up on the side of my desk. And for the first time in my life, I actually got agents, and the agents placed the books. And so suddenly I had this little flurry, book in 2018, book in 2020, book, 2 books in 2021.
Right.
Plus an anthology that I co-edited, and then there'll be another book in the series. So all of a sudden, things were just kind of buzzing, where for a while they were just sitting on my desk. So that's kind of the entire timeline. So long answer to a short question, but the thing that the initial fire that I had was quite selfish and self-centered. But when I was 20 years old, I got a job as a childcare worker with teenage girls who had been incarcerated for a number of reasons, from serious to frivolous, and serious to sexist, and serious to racist. So, for every kid that was there because they'd committed a crime or had serious issues, there were 10 kids who were just pulled off there because they were girls, or because they were Indigenous, or because they were lower class, and middle class social workers didn't want to deal with it, or all of the above. And so all of a sudden, over the course of about 4 years, kind of had my eyes open to how some things went in the world that I had only really known theoretically before. And that's when the fire got an external source. And it was this kind of font of rage, really, that was never going to go away. And you have a choice when you feel that kind of fury about how the world works. And one of the choices is, there are many choices at that point. I mean, some people really literally build a box around it, damp it down, and try and have a suburban life with a picket fence and 2 kids, 2 cats, 2 cars, and a gas barbecue, and just ignore it all. But other people try to do something, and tearing down the system through violent revolution was not my choice. It was obviously a choice. I mean, I came of age in 1970, and that was happening. People were doing that, but it wasn't really working. It wasn't working. Even then I could see that. And so my choice was just kind of continue to rage against the machine over the course of my life, preferably trying to push at systems from the side or from the inside. I discovered what didn't work. But that anger has probably driven all my subsequent writing, all the writing that I have written that matters, if you will.
Wow. So we're here today to talk about the Epitome Apartment Mystery Series.
Yes.
And now I'm curious to know where the rage came from, because I see where some of what you experienced with those girls plays into the main character. I already see that. But I'm curious about the rage, if that ties in too.
Well, if you just say, I'm mad as hell, sometimes people don't listen to you. But if you say, I have a smart-ass narrator who happens to have a real desire for social justice and a lot of snarky things to say about negative processes in the world, and she's doing something interesting, so she's just saying these things on the way by, you have a better chance of being heard. I mean, fiction that is deliberately didactic is usually awful. It's usually awful, right? It's like, here, I am a character. I will stand here and I will make a speech about the badness of the world. I am the evil character. I will tell you, you are wrong, and you just, you can't, it can't go like that. That's not what fiction is for. Fiction is for kind of a subversion of a reader's entire worldview through the presentation of another world for them to enter. That's what it's really about. So, and I've been working with that, the social justice rage may be driving me, but it's not writing the fiction. Writing the fiction is done by the fiction writer in my head who has a much more, I was going to say nuanced, but it's nuanced when it comes out. Let's say it has a much more visceral way of approaching it. It comes from the subconscious, comes from the back of the brain. It puts it all together. I throw a lot of stuff into the back of the brain, and I get integrated pieces of work back out. And some of the process in there is so unconscious that people can't analyze it. And there are all sorts of mystical, magical ways that writers talk about how that happens, which sometimes I use as metaphors, but I don't feel it's particularly mystical, magical process. It's just a very invisible process, right? So out come these people talking to me and to each other as I type. A lot of it, the purpose of the conscious brain for fiction is to filter out the crap and the bullshit, basically. And sometimes you can do that as you type, and sometimes you do it as you draft. But at the end, I try, and I am answering a question, but by a long way around because I'm talkative.
It's a great answer.
I try to make sure that if somebody is making a speech about something they care about, that it's really clear that that's the character making the speech. It's not the character standing in for the author. Mm-hmm. The author's effect is to be really good at story and really good at sentences and get in under the reader's radar to kind of burst. It's almost like you go in and then you set off this big holographic burst in their head of story. And they participate in that. And it's in the participation and the co-creation of the story that any kind of effect for the reader comes out, any kind of understanding or knowledge or whatever. So I work on, like, I've been getting better at this as I write more and get older. And when I sat down at the very beginning of this, what became this, and as background, I have to say that my friend Nora Abercrombie and I won a thing called the 3-day novel writing contest in 1986. Uh-huh. And it's literally that. Over the Labor Day weekend, you have to write a novel. And we did this, and it was a fun weekend. But it was also almost like NaNoWriMo, right? It's a workshop
condensed.
in novel writing. And
super
and
condensed.
So and I learned an immense amount about just, in a novel, you've got to get at it. You can't have creative angst and think deep thoughts and not actually type if you have to write it in 3 days.
Right.
So we did, and we won. And so some years later, I was thinking that nice, uncomplicated approach to a novel would be really nice to revisit now that I know some more stuff. And now that I've written some other novels and so on. So I thought I'll do the 3-day novel contest again. So I started typing thing, and then I got a call. My dad was in emergency. So I dropped everything and went over there. But I had this little piece of something that started a story really fast. And so I thought, just for fun, which is, writer kind of fun, which means for some values of fun, right? Yeah. Some really arcane, weird writerly values of fun that have nothing to do with like normal people fun. Mm-hmm. Just fun. What I want to do is I want to keep working on that whenever I feel like it. But the rule is that, there were 2 rules. One rule was you're going to write it in order. So the first time I've ever written a book that started with the first page and ended with the end. And I didn't jump back and forth and write bits from here and there. And the second rule was you're not going to have any angst. Like, you're just not going to suffer for your art, because life was already full of suffering at that point. There were lots of things going on that were not easy to weather, and as life does to people. And I just wasn't in the mood. And I was also working on a great looming serious novel, and that's its name with G, L, S, and capitalized, right? Great looming vulture of a novel. And I was done, my life was great and looming and serious, and I needed something different. So when I started writing The Adventures of Isabel, I just threw all that. I just said, I don't have to think about all that. And I'm pretty good at writing sentences. I write good sentences. So I just said, write some sentences. Write them in order. You know how story works. Just have a good time. It's not to say that I abandoned writing something that meant something. Just meant that I abandoned my own particular authorial angst process for something that was way simpler. Did not take it out of me. Did not make me miserable. which was, in retrospect, a nice piece of growth, because you can just, there are people, in fact, who start their writing careers with let's just write sentences, and they have long careers with lots of books in them, and so they don't necessarily suffer the same kinds of crippling angst that other slow writers like me used to, whatever. So when I did that, I mean, this character emerged, this smart aleck. She had some of my interest in grammar, and she had been a social worker, but she was definitely not me. She was, she had her own history that gradually started to emerge, but there's lots of hints in the books that lots of other stuff in the past. She's not young. She's not old, but she's not young. Mm-hmm. She's probably around, late 30s, early 40s, somewhere in there. But we don't really find that out for sure. We mostly find that out because she can't resist making certain cultural references. That is to say, the author can't resist making certain cultural references. And sometimes I have to ascribe them to her parents listening to certain records, or in her hearing when she was a child or something, But she's also pretty she's pretty savvy in terms of cultural literacy. And so, and she gets presented with a problem to solve, like we can talk a lot in some other conversation about why it's always murders in murder mysteries. And the short answer is that crimes against the vulnerable, lots of crimes against the vulnerable, are seen to be kind of the only grist for the crime novel or murder mystery mill. And there's lots of reasons for that in terms of our human idea about both crime and vulnerability. But what that means is that if you're going to write a crime novel, it usually has to have a murder in it. So I threw a murder at her. Mm-hmm. I did things to her deliberately to get her moving. I made her poor, and I gave her a cat who threw up into the TV and broke it, and just all the things that and I did have some fun. I named people after people I know, or I created the villain's name out of the names of 3 or 4 politicians who were particularly awful, and I
love that.
But it wasn't written on purpose to be a satirical document. It was just it was a story, and it developed. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed it, and so I did another one. And at that point, they're sitting on my desk with with an idea that they should go somewhere. But at that point, a local writer named Wayne Arthurson, who's also a mystery writer, decided that he would become an agent as well. And here's a guy who knows the mystery field. So we had lunch. It was at the Vietnamese restaurants. It wasn't exactly what you imagine in the movies, going to the...
It wasn't 21.
But, he's a writer, I'm a writer, we're poor. We had some pho, and mm-hmm. And talked about, would we do this? And I said, please do this. And it was a handshake deal. It was like, take these away. I don't want to hear the nuts and bolts of what you do. If you want anything from me, you let me know. And if you have any success, you let me know. And if you feel like keeping me posted a little bit, okay, but I don't want to hear every time you get a rejection. That'll make me feel miserable. So just take them away. And he placed them with ECW Press, which is way bigger and more active press than I actually had remembered. And they've done a really great job of the books. And so it was totally, and I was his first client for him to place books. So we've all had a great experience with it.
That's awesome.
And suddenly she's out in the world, making friends and influencing people,
And The Adventures of Isabel got enough attention that it's published in a couple of languages now.
That's right. Can I hold up?
Please do.
Absolutely.
Okay. This is the Canadian and US edition, mm-hmm. From ECW Press. It's a very pretty book. I love it. And the boots are part of the plot point. One of the characters has these over the knee, high heel, tuck me boot kind of things, and the narrator's cat falls in love with the boots and won't let them alone and sleeps on them and just adores them. So when they put the boots on the cover, I was totally delighted because it was perfect.
That's awesome.
But for the pandemic, we might have managed to get Fluvlog to do some sponsorship because we had a launch all lined up at the Fluvlog store here. And we were getting them interested, and then all of a sudden we had the pandemic. We couldn't have any events.
Sure.
So sigh, but it was a nice moment anyway, and maybe after we can do anyway. So Canadian edition looks beautiful, really nice book. They sold the rights to England and Germany, which was good for me because it meant I earned out my advance before the book even came out. Nice. So that was 2020. And then in 2020, when the English edition came out, and it looks like this, which is also very sort of, you get a bit of the kind of pop culture madcap
film
vibe
kind of look. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and apparently this cover really resonates in England. It took some convincing for me because I was so in love with the original cover, and it's like, do I love the green cover as much as I love the original? And I came to like it in part because so many of my English friends said, "Oh yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. It fits a lot of other covers in the same kind of market," and so on. So that was that. And then late in 2021, the German edition came out. Now, I had been warned that I wasn't going to hear about it. I was likely going to hear about it when ECW checked the catalog for the buyer. It was bought by Surkamp Verlag, which is a big German publisher. They're the kind of literary publisher that published people like Bertolt Brecht and so on after the war. And they're big, and they have this mystery line. And so ECW was delighted to sell it to them. But they said, we don't usually hear, like the last time we sold them a book was years ago. And so we're really glad they bought this one, but we don't usually hear what happens until it's happened. Well, as it happened, the editor of the line, whose name is Thomas Wertje? Yeah.
Sure, we'll go with that.
We'll go with that. Sorry, I'm trying to get some light on that page. It's not working. Anyway, he got in touch with me for another reason. I'd actually done a blog post about an old ballad called Duncan and Brady, which is also known as Been on the Job Too Long. And it's about a crooked cop in the 1860s, sort of. It's a chronicle of an interaction, changed, of course, and long story. But anyway, it had been published in something called, I think, Crime Reads blog, and he wanted to republish it in his German crime magazine. And he said, "Oh, and by the way, your book's coming out in next week." And I have to break the news to you that we decided to change the title to make it fit our market, and we're trying to get a young, diverse crowd attracted to this book. So just to for the readers or for the listeners who haven't read this book yet, it's about a downsized social worker with a lot of vivid friends, and who herself is vivid. She is nameless in the tradition of all the noir detectives and smartass and whatever, but what she is not is in any way affiliated with actual police. So they changed the title. This is the German.
For people who are not viewing it, it says drag cop.
Yeah.
Drag cop. Yes. Drag cop, and it's a thriller. It says it's a thriller.
Yep.
but there's my name and Sur Camp, and it is quite a dramatic cover. It's great. So it was actually reviewed really well in Germany and in England, but in Germany, Der Spiegel reviewed it, which is like the best venue, right? Like getting the New York Times or the London Times or something, right? And the first thing they said was, it's customary to be able to tell what the contents of a book are by the title, but in this book, the Canadian title was this, and that's more descriptive, really. But then they went on to rave about the book, so they noted that the title was, because I had sort of said to the editor, don't you think people will expect something different when they open the pages of a book called Drag Cop?
Drag Cop.
And he said, no, we think it's going to be fine and it's going to hit diverse audience. But it is true that he emailed me and said that after the Der Spiegel review came out, they sold 500 copies immediately. So so apparently people don't much care that it's called that, and they're having fun reading it. And so all of a sudden this book, which in some circles was considered quite slight compared to the other things that I had been writing, has actually been going places big time. And I will share with you my secret wish.
Yes.
My secret wish is that somebody will make a Netflix series out of this, because it would be perfect. And think of, did I say that out loud with my outside voice? No, but really, it would be quite perfect.
It would. Well,
so that was book number 1. And that had some success. And apparently the press is now talking to the same publishers about book number 2. And since we're on a roll, I'm going to, on holding up covers, I'll hold up the cover to book number 2. So same detective, still doesn't have a name. You may notice a theme in these titles. They're based on nursery rhymes, nursery poems.
Yeah.
The first one is by
Vance, do you want to say the name of? Do you want to say the name of that book, because our viewers will see it, but our audio listeners.
Yeah, so your audio listeners, the first book is called The Adventures of Isabel, and it's from an Ogden Nash poem that I learned, I had recited when I was a kid. Isabel met an enormous bear. Isabel didn't care, right? And Isabel, of course, triumphs over all the obstacles: the bear, the witch, the giant. And the second book is called What's the Matter with Mary Jane? And it's from an A.A. Milne poem. What's the matter with Mary Jane? She hasn't an ache and she hasn't a pain, and it's lovely rice pudding for dinner again. What's the matter with Mary Jane? When I was a kid, my mother used to recite that to me and say, what's the matter with Candas Jane? Whenever I was crying. It used to make me so mad. Like, nothing's the matter with me. In any case, so that was the second book, and it just came out last year, 2021, and is apparently also doing very well, getting great reviews. I'm feeling like I'm having this lovely little, late career renaissance in a way, because it was that little slump, and then a bunch of books that all got great critical attention. So I have other books I can hold up, but
it's all about perseverance.
It is. And congratulations for inserting a lot of diversity into the mystery crime genre.
Well, when I've been reading mysteries ever since my parents were bringing them home from the library. And I was a kid, reading anything that came in the house. It's not that the diversity isn't there. It's that it rises and then gets forgotten. Okay. So the canon, if you will, the canon stays with this solidly, basically masculine, heteronormative, usually kind of miserably heteronormative. They're always divorced or whatever, but these miserable white male detectives, basically, who have hard lives. But I remember reading. Now I'm trying to remember the name of the author, because I remember the name of the detective. Dave Brandstetter was the detective. He was a gay male detective, I think living in California somewhere, written by Joseph something.
Was it
something,
Wembo?
anyway. And that was in the 70s, and Rita Mae Brown eventually started writing a mystery series with a cat in it, and that was kind of fun. But what seems to happen, and I've seen it more than once over just the course of my writing life, is these little extrusions of diversity, and then the pressure back toward the normative. So there's been like at least 2 cycles of that since I've been working. So it always kind of surprises me when I think about, here I am at my age, basically innovating again, damn it, because I've innovated before. Like, let me talk to you about not using pronouns in my short fiction in like 1970, whatever, and people catching on to that eventually. I had a book published in 1988 that had those stories in it. And it was in like the late 90s that people are going, oh my God, I've discovered these stories by this Candas Jane Dorsey who like doesn't assign a gender pronoun to her characters. Right. And I'm thinking, old news. 20 years ago, I wrote those stories 20 years ago. And so, being ahead of my time is actually kind of a drag, I gotta say. It's very tiring, and you don't get paid for it.
But it sounds like eventually you get recognition for it.
And so I've got to apologize for that. But honestly, writers, if anyone has this idea based on watching TV series and movies that writers live in giant Manhattan lofts and have boodles of money and can do anything, and can live in luxury, I got to tell you that for every Richard Castle character, there's 100,000 writers, all getting published, all in the mid-list, living at the poverty line and retiring into poverty. And readers, we have a deal with our readers, right? That's who we connect with. But let them not think of us as driven by money, because that's hopeless. That's just hopeless. If you think you're going to, I tell my writing students this, and people that I've been hired to edit, if you think you're going to make money doing this, you may be lucky. You may be one of the one person who gets the movie rights picked up. But if you're not lucky, you're gonna have to find yourself another reason to do this stuff. You got to do it for both the love of the work and also the desire to be heard saying something that you think is important. Because I think that's part of it too. And people who are just craft and get discouraged really fast because they can make a good story, but they don't necessarily know what it's for. And if they don't immediately get the positive reinforcement of publication, they can say, oh, I'll go do something else that's good craft, right? And that could be plumbing or auto body or visual art or anything, or making music or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's this question of, you can just trade one craft for another and be more successful. But people who have craft and who have something to say can make a success, even if it's a modest success. But you can't go into it assuming you're going to be the star in the firmament,
right?
And it's possibly actively dangerous to make that assumption. It's bad for your art, to be honest. You get distracted. You start writing things because you think that maybe if you write it that way, that it will be a Netflix series, right? And so so things can sometimes happen to make people financially successful, but just so people understand that the reason this boat this whole boat of literature goes out to sea is that it's being rowed by a bunch of people who love books, who love writing books, love reading books, who love publishing books. There's been a lot on the Twitter recently about sort of the mess publishing is in, but I just saw a really good thread that someone did, which said, the mess is not about the editors or the writers or even the publishers at the line level, ones who actually physically create the books. Mm-hmm. The mess is in 4 big companies owning most of the book market in the USA. And here's where those companies come from, and here's what they're serving. Because when I was publishing, it's true, I stopped in 2006, so it's a while ago, but at that time, the margin for publishing worldwide was 1% to 2%. Now, we all know that we live in capitalism, and capitalism likes to think that if you're in a successful business, your margin will be 12 to 15%. That's what your profit will be. Now, places like Holtzbrink or Bertelsmann or whatever have figured out how to create a margin out of publishing. And again, that's another whole podcast, right? So I won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, it is.
But there's also a whole lot of of smaller publishers like ECW, like Pushkin Press in the UK, who are working, as James Tiptree would have said, in the chinks of your world machine. They're working on the front lines, and my publishing company was like that. Mm-hmm. We were 14 years and did 104 titles, I think it was 104, used 104 ISBN numbers, and so that's not big, but if you put those 104 books in the right hands, you can have influence. You can have cultural influence. Yep. So, with a margin of 1% to 2% average worldwide, counting all the calendars and all the cookbooks, which are the big money earners in some kinds of publishing, and counting all of the James Pattersons and whatever, and it's still only that. What you see is a failure of capitalism, but the success of the love of books. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important for us all to understand when we're in this game, that right. We're not, despite the pressure to see this as a commodity, the fact is it's not a commodity, it's a piece. And I won't even call it intellectual property, because that's a particular term that I have some arguments with, but it's a piece of thought, let's put it that way, right? And that's sort of what we're all doing here. And I'm just lucky that these particular sarcastic, smart-ass thoughts have been catching on with people. So I'm very I rant a lot, so I'm sorry about that. So let me go back for a minute to your comment about diversity, because I think sometimes, and not by me, writers get told at the beginning of their career that they have to write to the market. Mm. Total lie. That's what commodifiers want. And that's what sometimes we think we have to do to succeed. But the real fact that I've discovered over years of being in the industry and knowing publishers, including at the big houses, knowing the editors there, is that every editor is looking to make their bones with something original, to discover an original writer, to discover a voice that is original. Now, some of them are within genres. So it's like, can I find a new fantasy voice, right? And they have their ideas of what is fantasy, but they're still able to make those discoveries. So you end up with somebody like Tamsin Muir, who wrote the in the Ninth, and there's a series. Brilliant British writer, gets in essence discovered. They weren't her first books. She writes about lesbian necromancers in space. That's her tagline. And her books are immensely popular. And then you get Martha Wells. Martha Wells wrote some decent sort of magical this and that fantasy. And then she wrote this series of books called The Murderbot Diaries. And they're science fiction. Murderbot is a combination of cloned human tissue and machine has been created as a security unit, basically a sort of private warrior that gets contracted out to people to protect them while they're doing planetary exploration and science and this and that. But is sapient, is sentient, is a person, and they have a thing, a governor module is part of their mechanical brain that if they don't do what they're supposed to do, the governor module will, in essence, blow up their brain and they will become immobilized. So Murderbot has disabled their governor module as and is continuing to do their work because what else are they going to do? But really likes to watch media. Basically the future equivalent of Netflix.
Sure.
And favorite show is called The Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon. And so, it's that's the setup, right? That's the premise. And we meet Murderbot, but Murderbot makes it really clear that they don't have a gender, that they're not interested in like human sex, and they're forced to eavesdrop during their company duties, and it's like they scrub that from their memory banks as soon as they possibly can, but they have a life and they have things they want, and they go through these adventures. So diversity is there. It's constantly being written, and often it's getting under the radar of regular readers who aren't even out to look for a diverse character. They're out to look for a good book.
Right.
And that to me is the best way that we can situate our characters and our stories, is make them good stories. Make sure that I have to say this very carefully. Make sure your publisher gets them out there into a wider band of people, if possible. Hope for good reviews in great places that make people buy your book, like getting a review of Der Spiegel, probably of the 500 who bought Dry Cop the next day or the next minute after reading that. Not all 500 were looking for a queer themed book.
True. Because
the review also said other things about the book. So to me, that's how we do enduring work. That's how we make it stick. Is we make the work, we give the work longevity by making it really good.
Right.
And the new readers who read it sometimes have their heads explode. When readers were reading those short stories in 1988 and they were writing in the reviews, and my goodness, there's some stories in this collection where the narrator doesn't have a gender, and my goodness, they're a starship captain, and I it's the first time I ever thought that maybe a starship captain could be a woman too. Of course, this was before Star Trek did its thing, but at least I wrote it before. Yeah. And so you see that the side effect. I mean, the initial effect is supposed to be read this good book. The side effect is if you read this book, your head will explode, and you can't get it back together the same way it was before it exploded.
Do you have 2 minutes to talk about your 2021 YA novel? Speaking of,
I absolutely do.
Genderless captains and head exploding.
Yes, I do, and I will hold it up for the camera. It is called The Story of My Life Ongoing by CS Cobb. And that's not a pseudonym. That is actually part of the title.
Yep.
It is by me. It is published by Inanna, INANNA Publishing, which is a small house in Canada that grew out of a magazine called Canadian Women's Studies, and is a kind of feminist and queer press. And this book actually was published in 21, but was written in 2006 and 7. And I had trouble placing it then because it was ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's ahead of the curve is that it's an epistolary book. It's written in letters and transcripts of like therapy sessions and memos and emails that have all been collected together. But it's from the point of view of an intersex teen named Corey Cobb, who finds themselves after the death of their father, who has kind of protected them from certain kinds of pressures and discriminations. The divorced mother gets custody because the father died young and unexpected and didn't leave a very coherent will. So his new wife is not the guardian, and Corey is back with a mother who wants to pressure them to choose a gender and get surgery and hormone therapy to bring them into kind of a socially normative place. And the mother wants them to be a girl, but the type of intersex that Corey is called sex chromosomal monaism. Sorry about my mouth being slower than my brain. And it's a type of intersex that is not associated with any other real health concerns, like Turner's syndrome or Klinefelter syndrome. It's basically just a person whose chromosomal makeup is kind of jumbled, and so they have characteristics of all the genders, or all the human sexes anyway, not genders. And Corey doesn't want to be anybody else but Corey. Doesn't want to be a boy, doesn't want to be a girl, doesn't actually feel the need, knows what kind of life they want to have, but it's not, for them, it's not dependent on altering. Like, they're quite happy with the body they are and the person they are genetically and so on. And so there's this pressure going on. But I want to be kind of clear that that's not the plot. That's just the setup. The plot is actually about Corey in the world, meeting another kid, and the other kid also has issues with a mother who has some problems, and together they kind of solve for that issue. So nice. It's not about Corey's big problem. Corey's kind of got that under control. Corey is just coming on to 16, can't be forced to have medical treatments with against their will. Knows that if they just hang on long enough, they'll be of age and it'll all be over. Right. Considers themselves a bit of in essence, a political prisoner, and then wants to get on with their life. And finally meets a friend, someone that they gradually, grow to respect and like each other, and begin to understand what has happened to each of them. And so that's what the book's about. Now, I wrote this book. Part of the book, unfortunately, takes place in a psych ward, because I say unfortunately because that was one of the reasons it was turned down by Penguin in 2007, because the editor said, we don't need another bin book, meaning loony bin, which made one of my writing colleagues. I was working in a group with Paulette Bourgeois, who is most known for Franklin the Turtle, the kids' books, but she was working on YA too, and she was so mad that she went to bookstores and looked at all the bookstores, and the only bin book she could find was Go Ask Alice from 1967 or 68. Wow. And she was, that's totally wrong. But then I kind of never resubmitted it. The editor that I could have sent it back to at Penguin got fired in the big random Penguin merger and purge, and I think she would have been open to looking at it again, but alas, right? So then I just kept it on my desk for a while, and then I did some other work for Inanna, writing forward for someone else's book and so on, and I really liked their vibe, and I thought they're really tiny, but I bet they would give this book good attention. So I sent it to them, and they took it, and that's how I got my YA agent, because I said to her, I haven't read a contract in a long time, and I'm tired and my eyes hurt, and will you be my agent? And she said sure, and quite nicely, Wayne, my adult agent, has just joined as an associate to the same agency where she's an associate. So now I'm actually represented through both of them by the Rights Factory, which also has like a big foreign rights and media rights arm. And so it's actually, I came to agents late in life, but I have to name check them because they're really great. But anyway, that's fantastic. And she finalized the contract for me, and then the book was published. But then I had to decide what to do, because one of the things, of course, is we know that in 2006 and 2007, the awareness and understanding of what intersex even is was almost zero.
Right.
And there was a thing called the Intersex Association of America or something like that. I hope I got it right. I decided what to do was put it in a frame and say, this all happened to Corey as a kid in 2007. And Corey's found under, in the closet, has found the box of all the things that they kept from that time. And Perfect. They decide, when they read it, they realize what's like, that it's a story and that it's something powerful. And they put it together. They use their pandemic time to put it together into a book, which is why it's called The Story of My Life, ongoing by CS Cobb. So that's how we framed the book. And the book is out there. Because Inanna is small, it's not getting the big splash that ECW gave the books, but I wanted to mention it because I think it's an important book to be out there at this time. And I love it. I love Corey. They are just I still make that mistake. I say he or she because I'm stuck as a human who's been
and they have both,
in this world for too long, but they are they epitomize all that is good that I remember from those teenage girls in the care center, which is they're so strong and they're so brave,
resilient.
Yeah,
perfect.
Well, not even resilient, because I hate that word, because it implies that it's the job of the underdog to put up with all this shit, whereas It's not. But they're brave and they're strong, and they take their situations and they make them work, and despite the grown-ups around them. And I saw that over and over in that work that I did, and that was almost 50 years ago, 45 years ago, and I see it in so many people today, and you're on the Twitter and you're reading disability Twitter and trans Twitter and queer Twitter and so on. And what you see is people just saying, I take control, I take it.
Absolutely.
And that's I think how it has to be.
Right.
And that would be my final rant there.
So what's up next for you?
Well, the third book has just been finished and sent off. It's called He Wasn't There Again Today. And it's based on that rhyme about when I was going up the stair, I met a man who wasn't there. It finishes the 3 mysteries that I've contracted for. Nice. And we'll see if there's more. I'm also sort of turning my many years of teaching writing into a book that I'm just about to pitch. I'm accumulating more short stories, but I'm also doing some, taking some time with the visual art a little bit, trying to get that together. This is the first, and the Great Looming Serious novel, I did finish it, and it's out there. with the agent. So we'll see what happens.
Nice.
But this is the first time in my life where I haven't sort of had any fiction projects that were already begun. And so it is kind of weird, and I'm trying to decide if I want to do more of that, or if I'll just concentrate on the nonfiction for a while or what. But we'll see. I mean, something will probably come to me. Usually it happens when I'm in the bathtub and
your muse decides to talk to you then.
I know, and I say, shut up, I'm just trying to have a bath.
So which social media is the best place for people to follow your updates?
Well, Facebook to some extent, although recently I've been a little lax. I'm on the Twitter, which I love to call the Twitter because it's so retro. You know, I know it's called Twitter, you guys. I'm making a joke. You know, don't at me. So I'm there as @CJD writer, and I'm on Facebook under my whole name, Candas Jane Dorsey. But you have to spell Candas right to get to me, because it's Candas. And you know, I've got to say that the pandemic has been really helpful in one way, which is to turn people's minds toward podcasts and video casts and Zoom meetings and so on. So right now, all the promotional work I've done for all these books is online on YouTube. Someone has posted it, whether it was a festival appearance, a reading, some of the students at the university where I teach did a long series of interviews. There's like almost 2 hours, 3 hours worth. So it's all online if you search for my name. Nice. So that's a thing that I didn't exactly plan for, but it's the only thing really that I have to thank the pandemic for.
Nice. Do you have any final words of wisdom?
Oh dear, words of wisdom, yikes. Well, I just want to thank you guys. I want to thank you very much for having me on your podcast / videocast / whatever this wonderful thing is, and for letting me talk at great length. But probably my words of wisdom go back to what we were talking about in terms of writing diversity, which is write what you must write, and the audience and the publication and so on will follow if it's of surpassing excellence. So don't write what people think you ought to write. Write who you really are. And there are a lot of people who wait to tell their stories until people in their lives are dead. You know, I can't write until my father dies, my mother dies, my whatever. You can write it. You just don't have to show anyone. So do it now. Mm-hmm. Do it now. Don't wait. Do it now. You know, these days of cloud storage, you don't even have to keep a copy at your house. You know, just so that you have a place to be authentic and to be who you are and to write the story that you must write. And to me, I tell all my students, writing is hard, and so you have to be energized through it by something, and that something should be the passion with which you come to it, the impetus to do the writing. That is going to carry you through all those hard sentences. So and the only way to do that is to tell the truth. Perfect. Tell what's true to you.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, folks. Written on the Edges, produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. If you enjoy learning about new artists, please like and subscribe so you get alerts for new episodes. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Candas Jane Dorsey for being with us. Candas, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Now, pick up the Epitome Apartments Mystery Series or The Story of My Life Ongoing by CS Cobb. Enjoy your read because you know it came from a place of knowing and excellence. We'll talk to you all again soon. And snarkiness. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.